Well, here we are back again with the Korg Minilogue to talk about the filter section today. I'm glad people seem to like the first video on the oscillators and the envelope generator. Cool. So yeah, as promised, here we are. I've set us up already. I've got a square wave with a ton of sub-oscillator. Hey, wait a minute. No, I don't. I lied. There we go. Now I should. There we go. That's what I wanted. So we've got this. We're trying to make like a big fat bass or something, and we get this. And that's cool, but let's just say it's still a little too bright for us. So what we can do, this filter right now is in a low pass mode. What that means is that literally the low end will pass through the filter. It's a filter in the sense not that like a coffee filter that's porous. The filters in synthesizers are kind of like gates. Think of it like water going down a stream and you're like slowly damming up like one side, the other side, or both sides. And that's a low pass, a high pass, or a notch filter, which does kind of both at the same time. This synthesizer on this has two modes. We have a two-pole mode and a four-pole mode. That nomenclature's kind of weird. You don't actually see that a lot on a lot of different synthesizers. And what that basically means is two-pole is a 12 decibel per octave filter, and four-pole is a 24 decibel per octave filter. Now, that's a mouthful of numbers. What the hell does that mean? 12 decibels per octave means that for every octave above wherever we set the cutoff point, for every octave over that point, the sound gets attenuated down 12 decibels or made 12 decibels quieter. And the four-pole mode at 24 decibels per octave is basically just a stronger version of that. So why call it two-pole and four-pole? Well, it has to do with the mathematics behind how they actually work. If you were to take and make a 3D model of what these actually do to the sound, the two-pole one looks like a tent. You have two poles and kind of like the sound wave is like draped over it in like a weird sort of Salvador Dali thing. And the four-pole mode is like a tent now with four stakes. So yeah, they sometimes call them that. So just know that. Pardon me, I just stuffed my face a second ago. Just know that if you ever see two-pole or four-pole or 12 decibel, 24 decibel, and on some synthesizers now you even get 48 decibel, that it's just how strong they are. Four-pole is stronger than two-pole. You can think of them, there's a really good graph. If you want to know more about like the mathematics behind it, I definitely recommend checking out Sound on Sound. They have a really great write-up on soundonsound.com. If you Google it, you'll find it. That has a lot of graphs and charts that explain how these actually work. The gist of it is that two-pole, it's not a smooth line or like a straight diagonal. A two-pole filter puts like basically a two-port corner on something. Think of like a knuckle on a finger. Like a two-pole will look like this, and the four-pole has like a more articulate kind of 4 points of articulation. Sorry for my the claws, but it's the best way I can think of to really visualize that. Anyway, enough of that. If you really want to know some of that math, you can go check it out. Let's just hear what these do. So we've got this sound. And maybe it's a little too bright, a little too buzzy for us. We want to kind of darken that a little bit more. That's where the filter would come in. We're in a low-pass mode, so if I bring the cutoff down, it almost sounds like we're fading out, but really what we're doing is we're just adding or attenuating that upper end of the sound and kind of cutting that brightness off. And you see it almost has more like a trumpet, kind of like a blare to it now. Whereas up here it's still very buzzy, but down here a little different. You do lose some volume when playing around with the filter. We do have a master volume. I can bring that back up. probably going to get really loud if I just do that. So you just got that buzz, and then we lose it, but we also lose some volume. You get filter sweeps, which are a lot of fun. A lot of synthesizer players love to do. Filters are one of the defining characteristics that really set synthesizers apart, and why why you buy more than one, I guess. Each brand, you know, they copy and clone each other quite a bit. There's a lot of funny stuff going around in the market where you'll see people try to cleverly point out what kind of filter they're doing, or like, hey, we took the filter from this other company's synthesizer, but they have to dance around the copyrights. So they come up with creative ways to name their filters when they're like borrowing the design from each other. It's fun. There's also resonance, though, is kind of like, you might think of it as sort of like a feedback for the filter. It's adding some sort of resonance and like bouncing around the sound a little bit more inside the box that you create when you bring some cutoff in. It'll sort of reverberate around a little bit more in there. So if we bring that up, you can hear it gets a little more high-pitched. We get kind of like, almost like a wow, like that. Wow. Like a duck or something, I don't know. We can get big wubs. Yeah, that filter, yeah, some would argue, like I said in our last video, that the wave generators and the envelope, in my opinion, are kind of like the two biggest characteristics of a sound that you generate. A lot of people would argue, and they would have a very strong argument, that actually maybe the oscillators and filter kind of create the tone. I could be totally wrong. I don't know. This is just kind of how I've come to learn it, with a lot about self-teaching and some various guides and books and stuff, my own interpretation. You can do some pretty gnarly things with a lot of filter. It can get pretty aggressive. Or like tune in deep space. You can hear that like way down. Maybe hope that translates, but I'm definitely getting like a very deep reverberation in the room when I have it down here. Yeah, I mean, the filter can do a lot. I don't really know what else to say beyond that, and some of those examples. There's a lot to do with it. I will probably show off a little bit more what we can do with that in the next video, when I will move on to some of the modulation with some of these, the oscillator modulation for VCO2 that we have here on the Minilogue, but more importantly, the LFO, and what you can do with that, what that is. So yeah, I hope this explained some of the filter and showed you some of the characteristics of that. Yeah, cool. Hang on yet, and we will be back with a little bit more.